Forced labor camps, one of the darkest chapters of the Second World War. Millions of people, men, women, even children, were imprisoned, abused and worked to death under brutal conditions, being exploited, humiliated and systematically dehumanized. After Nazi Germany invaded Yugoslavia in April 1941, the country was torn apart. Serbia fell under direct military administration of Germany and its allies. Almost immediately, a system of camps began to take shape: concentration camps, prisoner of war camps, and forced labor camps. In forced labor camps, local civilians, partisans, Jews, Roma, and political prisoners were forced into hard labor to support the Nazi war machine and occupation infrastructure. One of these forgotten sites is hidden deep in northern Serbia. In the autonomous province of Vojvodina lies the remains of Macahumka forced labor camp, long abandoned and largely erased from maps and memory. On the 80th anniversary of the victory over fascism in Europe, I set out to uncover what's left of this lost camp before it's completely forgotten. We are currently at the entrance to the camp, and over here are some constructions looking like hangars, which don't seem to be original. As far as I understand, after closure of the camp in 1944, part of this area still remained inhabited, just by ordinary people. And these hangars were used, and maybe still are used, for some agricultural purposes. For example, for storage of some agricultural equipment. This is the very first building which we can see while approaching the camp. I wasn't able to find any plan or scheme of this particular labor camp on the web. The information about this place is very limited. Anyway, let's see what the very first building which we can see looks from the inside. It's a little bit overgrown, which is not surprising. Inside there is basically nothing. On the bottom there is the floor made of bricks, and basically the whole construction was made of them. You can see proper bricks over here. And this is the support of the roof. There is a classic tile roof, typical for Europe. There is the word kutia on the wall, which means a dog in Hungarian language. Again, considering that this is partly Hungarian region, not surprising to see this word here. Actually, the whole construction looks just like a big garage for, let's say, some agricultural equipment or just for some vehicles. We can see that over here used to be gates, judging by this part. And this is the second section of the same building with this kind of the hole in the floor, which is not the hole. It was basically created here for checking the vehicle from the bottom. Before going deeper to the territory of the camp, I suggest checking another side construction, which is basically on the edge of this camp, to see whether it's similar to this hangar/garage or not. So this forced labor camp existed here for sole reason to force people to work for the occupation forces, to basically supply their needs. And as long as Vojvodina is agricultural region in Serbia, people were working in the fields here. And even though currently this labor camp doesn't operate, we can still see that the surrounding fields are being cultivated. Anyway, let's see what we can find in another abandoned construction. I have just entered it. For some reasons, some of the passages are blocked. I don't see much, so there is just wall. So windows are also blocked with bricks, and that's it. Okay, maybe there is an alternative entrance. It seems to me that they are growing onion here. The plant looks like onion. I'm trying to find an alternative entrance to the building, or at least approach it from another side. Well, initially I was planning to explore this area before all this grass would grow up, so I postponed my trip to here many times. And yeah, finally I'm here, but it's May. Everything is basically overgrown. Let's take a look inside the building, which actually looks like a barrack, but honestly I cannot see what's inside. Was it for agricultural purposes, or some people were allocated here? I know that totally 150 people were placed into this labor camp. Well, labor conditions obviously were pretty bad. Wasn't able to find the entrance to the second building, which I spotted. There is another one, which also looks similar. Yeah, things have been overgrown with pretty deep bushes. and some of them are actually quite sharp. All right, finally made it inside the second building. What we can see here. Here we can see the structure of the wall. Look at that. This is basically dirt, so they didn't use bricks, at least to construct these walls. And this is very common for at least this region of Serbia, to see houses made this way. So very simple materials. Not that much to see. The ruined roof. Some balconies collapsed. This room is empty. Well, I can imagine that it could be some kind of the administrative building. That's how it looks nowadays. The structure is very weak. And this is how the entrance looks. It's almost collapsed. Pretty dangerous to stay here, actually. In front of us is an old electricity substation. Similar substations can be found in many regions of Europe. These are the inside out of the electricity substation. Never been to this kind of buildings before. This tiny construction looks like an entry checkpoint. It was probably used after closure of the camp, as we can see some more modern materials. So maybe it was the checkpoint of some farm or some industry which was situated on the side of this labor camp. The building behind me is not the checkpoint of the security guard. This is the place of a person who was responsible for checking weight of vehicles. Again, this whole thing looks pretty new, so I'm not sure if it was used in times of Nazi Germany. Probably not. These are the scales on which I'm staying right now. So they were checking the weight of vehicles which were entering this territory. From the side of the scales we can see a tiny bee garden, which basically proves the fact that this area is still used for agricultural purposes. So someone collect honey here. This building looks particularly interesting. We can see a bunch of bullet holes in its wall. The question is if they appeared in times of the Second World War or later. Okay, so this whole building is basically the cattle pen, so the place where cattle was kept. I guess they maintained cows here, so they were placed in this like parts of the building. This is a massive container where there was the water, and this is interesting. What's this? Looks a bit like Arabic language. And this is probably gonna be the most unexpected find in this former labor camp. And this white wall is the sign in Arabic language. 2, 3, 4 years ago, northern Serbia experienced influx of migrants who came here with the purpose of crossing further from Serbia to European Union. The border with Hungary, which is already European Union, is not so far from here, and many of that people who came here, they had nothing with them and they were forced to just camp in the wilderness. They didn't have any home or money to rent hostels and hotels, so some of them were basically squatting some abandoned buildings and construction, like this cattle pen, like this farmhouse. Based on Google Translate, Abdar Shakil, may God have mercy on him. Don't know who is this person, but anyway, it's clear that migrants from Middle East were here at some point. Exploring these kind of places, you have to be extremely careful and watch every single step. This little thing has just got inside my sneaker. I accidentally stepped on it, and it almost punctured my foot. Luckily, I reacted quickly and managed to avoid it. Based on some sources, in the past there also was some kind of the narrow gauge railway, which was also maintained by prisoners of this camp. I cannot verify if this rail was used on that narrow gauge railway or not. Some kind of the rail is over here, a part of the construction of this farmhouse. It's clear that some buildings of the labor camp are gradually being demolished and dismantled. So I can imagine that basically construction materials which were used for the construction of this labor camp are going to be used for construction of something else by locals. So this labor camp doesn't have any official statues. It's not the object of historical heritage. That's why it's just abandoned structures and anyone can do anything with that. I'm gonna check another farmhouse. Maybe we can find something interesting over here. The structures are in pretty decent condition. This concrete looks brand new, so maybe someone started restoring this kind of a farm. We can see a lot of original things here which basically didn't exist in the first building. There was the garage, farmhouses, the building of headquarters, and that's it. So the question is, where did they allocate 150 people? Just a big garden on the site of the former Nazi labor camp, only in Serbia. Somehow I've never been that close to the big garden, but I don't see bees. Oh no, actually there are some bees. And I guess we finally found the place where people lived. You see, a good portion of this construction was ruined, but this is what has been preserved. Somehow I'm sure that this used to be the main inhabited building, potentially the dormitory of prisoners. We are finally inside the place which could potentially be the residential area. So the building where prisoners of this labor camp lived. Just judging by the amount of windows, that they are all celled like in prison. Don't know what these structures are. Well, the territory of the camp isn't that big. You can basically walk through it in just a few minutes. We have already seen almost all of the buildings which have been preserved over here. There is only one farmhouse left, but I doubt that we can find anything interesting there, so I'll just skip it. Almost missed one significant detail. So when you pass most of the territory of the camp, on the right side you can see an unremarkable piece of concrete. And this piece of concrete is actually the monument to apparently liberators of Yugoslavia. So this territory was liberated from Nazi occupation in 1944. It says something like 1944 to 1974. Anyway, the monument is abandoned as well as the whole camp. The Matahumka labor camp was established in 1943. The first group of 150 camp inmates was transferred to Matahumka and placed in a newly established labor camp in March, at the very beginning of agriculture season. The camp was heavily guarded, and prisoners were accompanied by numerous guards when sent to work. Work began at 6 in the morning and lasted until 6 in the evening, with only a short break for lunch. Most of the labor involved field work, hoeing corn, thinning and tending sugar beets and sunflowers, spraying vineyards, and similar tasks. During the sweltering heat of July and August, groups of prisoners were also tasked with maintaining the narrow gauge railway. Others worked in pig pens or large stables, housing horses and cattle.